Dimitri, your book suggests that the American government exploded a nuclear weapon underneath World Trade Center buildings 1 and 2. Tell us, what happens when you press the button?
Well, first of all, I want to say that this book does not suggest, it proves that the tower was demolished by the nuclear device. The second thing, that probably it is not correct to use the word weapons in regard to this explosion, because the weapons is the thing which is primarily intended to kill the people. But it was just a nuclear demolition device which has no status of weapons, I would say like this. But still it was a nuclear device.
Okay.
Just to correct the question,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Okay, I accept that. Tell us how it works.
Okay. Actually, you know, at one point I wrote an article for Wikipedia with detailed explanation how to use the nuclear device to demolish a skyscraper. And it was a good article with a good explanation. This is some page of it with a diagram. But unfortunately, this article did not exist in Wikipedia longer than a week. It was accused of being a crazy conspiracy theory and removed. Yes. Even though I did not mention the World Trade Center in it. The history of this article is like this. Because I have a website and I have some visitors who requested me to write an academic-looking article for Wikipedia on nuclear demolition in general. So I wrote the article with detailed explanation, without mentioning September 11 or World Trade Center or New York or even America. I just only explain on purely technical terms how to use a underground nuclear explosion to demolish a skyscraper. So it means it was nothing, no politics, no conspiracies involved, just purely technical article. Still it was accused of being 9/11 conspiracy theory and removed. Okay, I still keep it in another website. I made the copy of the Wikipedia article, so it is www.nuclear-demolition-wikipedia.com. So if anyone is interested, he can check it. And I will try to use the same explanation now. Okay, this is the... First of all, I have to explain what is the difference between atmospheric nuclear explosion and underground nuclear explosion. Because many people confuse them, and that's why it seems for them that if nuclear device was used to demolish the World Trade Center, then the devastation around should look like Hiroshima. Okay, I will explain why it should not be. Okay, let's make the difference. Okay, here we are talking about underground nuclear explosion. And here about atmospheric. So the difference between the two is this. When nuclear device explodes in atmospheric condition, it will release its entire energy, about 99%, in the form of X-rays. So, and this is tremendous energy, because the almost entire energy of the nuclear explosion is represented by X-rays. So these X-rays cannot travel far in atmospheric conditions, because the X-rays will be absorbed by the atoms of air. That's why in a few milliseconds, the entire energy of the nuclear explosion will be absorbed by the air. Few tens meters around the hypocenter, depend on the actual yield of nuclear explosions. So this area will absorb the entire energy, and it will be extremely overheated. So it will look like a ball of plasma, very similar to our sun, orange color. And it will emit a secondary radiation, which they call thermal radiation. And this thermal radiation is very similar to sunlight, but just much more intense, and it can travel really far. That's why, depending on the yield of nuclear explosion, the thermal radiation can travel a few kilometers. And for the big yields, a few tens kilometers, up to 50 kilometers, for the really big explosions. And this is one of the destructive factors of nuclear explosions, which can burn people and cause fires around and so on. So the most of the devastation actually is caused by thermal radiation.
Thermal radiation.
Thermal radiation, yes. Maybe I pronounce it not correctly. But you understand what I mean. So the secondary factor, which is even more destructive than the thermal radiation, is the air blast wave. So the air blast wave occurs because of the different thing. If this area is extremely overheating, this one, which they call fireballs, it tends to hit the more and more air around itself. So it will expand. And the expansion of the heated area will cause automatically cooling at the middle. So the energy will pass slowly from the center to the periphery of the expanding fireballs. And at one point, the expanding area will break away from the fireballs and will expand on its own. Further and further and further. At this point, a so-called air blast wave would be created. So the air blast wave is when it breaks from the expanding fireballs and continues to travel on its own. It does not carry the temperature, but it carries like a hard front of compressed air, which travels to every direction with a supersonic speed, just killing the people, smashing the buildings, and so on. That everybody knows. That is another main destructive factor of nuclear explosion. So usually in nuclear explosion they distinguish 5 destructive factors. One is the thermal radiation, which can burn. The second one is the air blast wave, which is even more powerful in some cases. The third one is the ionizing radiation, which can penetrate people and injure them by the radiation. The fourth one is the consecutive radioactive contamination of surroundings, which can persist for some time. And the fifth is a so-called electromagnetic pulse, which cannot injure the people, but can destroy electronic and electric devices around. Okay, so as you can see that the first of these two factors, air blast wave and the thermal radiation, they can only be in atmospheric conditions because they need the air for this reason. Okay? Because the air blast wave cannot be created unless there is an air around. And the nuclear fireballs, which represent the overheated air, cannot be created either if you don't have the air. Okay? So the electromagnetic pulse is another thing which does not require the air actually, but I will explain it later. And ionizing penetrating radiation that instantly goes to every direction from the hypocenter of nuclear explosion, that is just a part of primary radiation, because as I said that 99% of it represented by X-rays, but still 1% of it is represented by the gamma rays and the neutrons, which can travel very far and injure the people. So, if we talk now about the underground nuclear explosion, we will see a different picture.